Dad log, star date 01152021. Welcome back to the Dad logs, where today we're going to talk about consistency in your content. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Dad Logs, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Dad Got Game, and it's good to have you today. Today, we want to talk about creating consistent content. So this is going to be things from setting a schedule, to picking your games, to deciding what platforms you're going to deploy your content on, and all of the above. There are some hotly contested topics that are going to come to you today. I have found and will be sharing my knowledge and my experience with you. So as always, take this with a grain of salt, simply sharing my experiences with you and sharing what has worked for me and what has gotten me in the last 3.5 years from being a hobby streamer to doing this full time. And so the first thing that I want to dive into talking about is setting a schedule. I think for the purposes of creating content, setting a schedule is hugely important. You're going to find people who say that setting a schedule is hugely detrimental. Just do it whenever you can. And for some people, that is going to have to be the modus operandi that you will operate under, because you work a job that has varying schedules from week to week. If you work in retail, or if you're in the Army, if you have a job that requires your schedule to be ever changing, it will be very, very difficult to set a schedule. But if there is any way that, especially when you're first starting off, that you can set a schedule, I personally have found that setting a schedule, one, keeps me on task. Keeping yourself on task is a major, major, major hurdle for creating consistent content. You want to make sure that you're staying on task, that your time management, especially when this isn't your full-time job, making sure that you stay consistent in where you create your content, how you create your content, and when you create your content. That's important. So make sure that you're setting a schedule that you can maintain, and this is super important. Make sure you can set a schedule that you can maintain week over week, month over month, year over year. A lot of people have a tendency to go all out, and they're like, I'm going to do 7 days a week, 4 hours a night, and I am going to just go all in on this content creation thing. When you get home from work and you realize after a week that, holy cow, this is a lot of time sitting in front of a camera talking to nobody, or talking to just a few people, or whatever the case might be. It's a lot of time in the chair, right? So if you, let's say, work a construction job during the day, and you're working 10 hours a day, you're driving an hour both ways, you're working 10 hours a day, and then you get home and you've set this schedule where you're trying to create 4 hours of content a night, 7 days a week, you're going to realize real fast that you are going to burn out extremely quickly. And this is part of making sure that you can be consistent in your content, because if you're not able to be consistent, people won't know when to find you. And that's always the logic that I've used in making sure that I have a set schedule and that I maintain that schedule over long periods of time. It can be very easy when you are creating content to fall out of a schedule, and then people don't know when you're going to be live next. So if you want people to get into a routine where they're always turning your stream on and you're their entertainment versus Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu, you are not only competing with every other streamer out there that is creating content at this moment, you're also competing with other forms of entertainment. You are competing for attention. So the more consistent you can be in your schedule that you set, the better off you're going to be. So make sure you set a schedule. Part of setting that schedule is going to also be diversifying your content. So if you're going to dedicate X amount of time to streaming every week, you should be dedicating X amount of time to also creating content for your social media platforms, creating content for TikTok and Twitter, YouTube and Instagram or Facebook, right? So wherever you decide you're going to create content, you need to make sure you set aside time to also create content in other places. So if you're not focused on content diversification, you're severely limiting your ability to grow, but you're also putting a lot of risk on if your primary content platform decides to take a dive or disappear altogether. Thanks, Mixer. If all of a sudden your content platform completely disappeared altogether, you want to make sure that you are creating content elsewhere so your community knows where to find you. So content diversification is something that is huge when it comes to creating consistent content. And I have gotten to a point now where I am recommending to people, if you are not creating content on other platforms, you are missing a huge opportunity, and you're also inherently adding risk to the success of your content creation career over the course of time. The longer you wait to start creating content on every platform, the higher that risk gets. Because the more you dive into one single platform to create content on, the more risk there is that one platform decides to make a change that completely nosedives your business. So make sure that you are diversifying your content across multiple platforms. Now, what does that maybe look like? What we're talking about when we're talking about content diversification is we're talking about creating content on as many platforms as you possibly can, right? So if your primary platform for content creation is live streaming, let's say you stream on Twitch or Facebook Gaming, you need to make sure that you're taking some of that content that maybe you're creating, or you're dedicating time to create separate content for other platforms. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, TikTok. There's so many places that you can dedicate time into growing, but you need to take that time, because if a platform decides to just go away, Mixer, if a platform decides to just to go away and you've dedicated all of your time into that platform, right? Your community will be completely spread out. They will be looking for the next place that they decide to consume content from. So if they decide that they're going to move from Mixer to Twitch, they may come over and they may find your channel, right? But if you were already creating content on Twitch, you've already established that you're there. There's a base for that. If they decide that they wanted to move completely to consuming content on Instagram, per se, and you've dedicated a good amount of time already to creating content on Instagram, you've now set yourself up for success and making sure that you don't lose a number of your followers and people who consumed your content because you weren't creating content there to begin with. Now, there's something to be said for spreading yourself too thin. If you try and create content on every available platform there is today, you will be spread thin, and that could hurt maintaining your schedule as appropriate. Okay, so there's a bit of caution in my recommendation that you are diversifying your content on a regular basis, and you need to make sure that you can balance that diversification without impacting and putting your primary sense of content at risk. So content diversification is important, but there's a balance to be struck between creating content on every possible platform and creating good content on a select few platforms, and making sure that whatever content you're creating, that you're doing it well. So if you're going to dedicate time to creating live streaming content, YouTube shorts, which convert well to TikTok, by the way, and Instagram photo-based content, right? Maybe not video-based content, but photo-based content. You've now decided that you are going to dedicate yourself to 4 out of the 7 or 8 main platforms, right? And you're going to do all 4 bits of that content very well, right? So for me, as I'm moving into 2021 and looking at what full-time content creation looks for me, I'm looking at dedicating specific time to a few different places. One, Twitch is my live streaming platform as of right now. So I am dedicating a lot of time to Twitch. I am doing 24 hours of dedicated live streaming content there. Now, some of that content, a small portion of that content, is able to be converted and moved over to some of the other platforms that I'm dedicating time to: Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube specifically. Now, the reason why I'm picking those content platforms, now I'm also on Twitter, but I'm not dedicating explicit time to creating Twitter content, because I personally use Twitter more as a way to gauge and have conversations with people. So I'm talking with other creators, I'm talking with folks from the community, I'm talking with game developers, and that's more discussion-based content and less about actually creating multimedia content for consumption, as opposed to having conversation-based content out on Twitter. But in terms of the content that I'm looking at dedicating myself to creating, we're creating our Twitch live stream content. We're going to be focusing on using YouTube shorts and TikToks interchangeably and creating content dedicated for those platforms in those specific formats, which is another part of content diversification that's important, is making sure that you're learning about content wrapping, if you will, right? The way you take your content, potentially if you're repackaging live stream content and repackaging it for, say, TikTok and YouTube shorts, you want to make sure that you are focused on repackaging that content in a way that formats well for the medium that you are trying to target. And so you're taking your live streaming content, moving it over to, say, YouTube shorts or TikTok, or alternatively, you're curating content specifically for those platforms. And that's important as well. So I am looking specifically at creating YouTube short or TikTok type content that is going to be short form content that's going to be dedicated and built specifically for that format. And it's going to have a greater impact than the content that I would take that would be live stream content potentially repackaged for YouTube shorts and for TikTok. When we're talking about Instagram, that's its own beast. You're looking not just at the algorithm and hashtags, how you can use that for discoverability, but you're also then having a third dedicated package, if you will, or a third dedicated format for Instagram. Most Instagram content is best suited for square content because of the way that Instagram displays that content, right? So when we're talking about content diversification, it's not just choosing a platform to go create content on, it's deciding if I'm going to take my main content and repurpose it for these other platforms, or if I'm going to take dedicated time to create content specific for those platforms and create an experience on those platforms versus just repackaging what I'm making initially. Now, we're all limited with the amount of time in the day that we have to create content, right? You have to, as I said, with the setting the schedule, you have to balance all of the things that are going on, and you need to be explicit about how much time am I going to dedicate to this content versus this content versus this content. And you have to, when you're in the position of being in a full-time role, you have to make a decision about how you're going to manage your time and what is paying off the most. What is either paying off the most from a growth standpoint What is paying off the most from a financial standpoint? What am I going to dedicate my time to make sure that I am growing and am financially successful as a full-time content creator? So when I talk about creating an experience, this leads right into our next topic. A lot of people, when they turn on the camera, when they hit that go live button, many gaming creators just do what they do normally when they play a game. Their head's down, they're playing the video game, and they're not doing anything else. And they're barely talking. And that, my friends, is what you call boring. Don't create boring content. If you're going to dedicate time to turning on your live stream, you need to make sure you're doing something to engage your audience. Because if you're not engaging your audience, even if there's no one there, if you're not engaging, someone could pop in. Someone could pop into your channel, and you're so focused on the video game at the time that you completely miss that they even popped in. They might not say anything, but you weren't engaging them in the first place. So it's super important to make sure that you are engaging your audience and that you're creating an experience that someone would want to come back to day after day after day. So make sure that you are creating an experience and not just playing a game. This is something that I did early on in my content career, was that I dedicated time to creating items in my toolbox, items in my experience that would make people want to come back time and time again. Some of this could be creating a currency, right? With a cool name. I am a dad, so I have what's called allowance. I give you guys allowance for showing up, right? And you can use that allowance to do different things in the stream, right? So you can, for instance, play a dad joke with your allowance. And I have dedicated time to creating a dad joke experience now in my stream, instead of it just being a little chat message, right? You get a chat message and you get a dedicated video with an overlay and a pop-up and all this stuff, right? That's part of creating the experience of what it looks like to come into the dad cave and to be entertained, right? So I created an entire currency that you can earn as part of the experience in the dad cave, and you can do various things with it. You can make me sing songs, you can play dad jokes, you can make things happen with the overlay, right? There are ways that you can have an impact as a community member in my stream because I've taken the time to dedicate to building that infrastructure to create an experience and to not just play a video game. So moving on from creating an experience, part of creating that experience is actually picking the games that you're going to play. Now, a lot of folks will tell you to play the games you love, right? And there's a certain amount of truth in that. Because if you're playing a game just for the sake of growth, you're going to find that you're not creating the best content you can create, right? So there is absolutely a certain kernel of truth to play the game that you love to play, or the games that you love to play, because that is where you're going to make your best content. That is undeniable. However, there's a side of this that can be focused on growth hacks, if you will. So we're going to give you a little growth hack here. If you are starting from nothing and you are starting to stream, and this is the first time you're diving into this and you're doing this on Twitch, this is going to be Twitch specific, okay? One growth hack that you can leverage is to find games that you enjoy playing, maybe that not that you love to play, but that you enjoy playing, that have smaller directories. And what I mean by smaller directories is that when you look at Twitch, you can go to what's called categories. And when you look at those categories, there's a certain number of viewers that are in that category. Generally speaking, games like League of Legends, Apex Legends, Fortnite, Call of Duty, those categories are gigantic with tens of thousands of viewers in them. And generally speaking, there's tens of thousands of viewers in them because there's thousands and thousands of streamers that are streaming that game, which means that if you want to get discovered, right? And again, the way that Twitch works is that normally it lists by viewership. Now in the past, like 6 to 12 months, they've done a little bit to try and increase discoverability on their platform. Recommended for you can sort by default as recommended versus by viewership, and there's some different filters and things that you can now use for discoverability. But generally speaking, if you're in the League of Legends directory, there are going to be probably 1,000 people who have more viewership or more, 1,000 people or more who have more viewership than you do. So if you're dedicated to, say, League of Legends, right, you're going to struggle from a growth standpoint unless you're leveraging other platforms, and this goes back to the content diversification conversation, unless you're leveraging other platforms to grow your Twitch following. Because if you've got 5 people watching you in the League of Legends directory, you are going to be buried for anyone who's looking for League of Legends content, right? It doesn't matter how good you are at the game. You could be a challenger in that game and you will still be buried because people will not find you because of the number of viewers that you have, right? So when you're looking at picking games, you have to make a decision or find games that you love or like to play that offer you an opportunity for growth as well. I'll give you an example. When I first started streaming 3.5 years ago, I was in love with Warframe, the game Warframe. I became a Warframe partner. I loved creating Warframe content. It also so happened that Warframe was a smaller directory when I was getting into content creation. So the combination of smaller directory, creating an experience, and playing or picking a game that had a smaller directory catapulted me to finding people and people finding me so that I could grow the community and continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. When I left Twitch in 2017, early 2018, I had 750 followers. There were people who had been streaming for years before me who didn't have 750 followers, right? So picking your games and researching what games you think you can grow in and enjoy both is just a little hack that you can use to grow more quickly than someone who is just going to spend time in the League of Legends directory and not do any other content outside of just Twitch streaming. So if I make any recommendation for you in terms of picking a game and doing your research about what games you think you can grow in, it would be this. Play a game that you enjoy. Just know that if you pick a game like League of Legends or Apex Legends or whatever, know that your growth isn't going to come from Twitch. Your growth, it doesn't matter how much time you spend on Twitch either. Your growth will not come from Twitch. Your growth is going to have to come from somewhere else because your discoverability will be 0 on Twitch. So you're going to have to grow your following in some other way. If you pick a game like Warframe or Paladins or a game that has around 1,000 people in the directory, even with only a few people watching, you have way a better chance of being discovered in a directory like that than you will ever in the big directories. So keep that in mind when you start looking at what you want out of growth or what you want from a growth objective, you need to make some decisions about what games you're going to pick and do your research. There are plenty of trackers out there, twitchtracker.net. There's a few other trackers out there that you can use. Look at the Steam charts. What's a popular game? Take a look at the top 20 games, 25 games on the Steam charts. Warframe is almost always on that list. And the Warframe directory is always small for the most part. Unless there's a new drop, then sometimes you'll see the Warframe directory balloon. But generally speaking, if you take a look at the Steam charts and you could find a game in the top 20 that's being played in the top 20 that has a small directory around 1,000 people, there's a good chance for growth there. Okay? So when you're choosing your games, do your research, pick games that you enjoy playing. Don't play a game just because you're going to grow in it. That is a recipe for disaster because people are going to see right through that. Okay? Don't play a game just for growth. Play a game that you truly enjoy. And if you happen to love a game that gives you an opportunity for growth, you're going to see growth in a way that most other creators won't see. Okay? I'd like to dive into time management. I am not the person to be talking about time management. So for those of you who are looking for advice on time management, and there's a couple different things to cover in this. There's time management when we're talking part-time, and there's time management when we're talking full-time. And I said earlier in the podcast that time management is important regardless of whether you're a part-time creator or a full-time creator. And I said time management is more important as a part-time creator than it is as a full-time creator. And I'm kicking myself because I don't think that that's necessarily true. Time management isn't necessarily more important in either part-time or full-time content creation. However, it's the necessity for time management and where the focus of your time management is that ends up changing between part-time and full-time. Now, having been a part-time creator, moving into full-time and always increasing my workload throughout that process, right? So when I started streaming, I was streaming 2 days a week. Eventually, I added a third day. Then I added a fourth day. Then it came to a point where I was like, okay, my job's ending. Let's ramp it up to 6 days a week, right? So I ramped it up to 6 days a week, and everything was cruising along just fine. Then Mixer shut down. Then the pandemic hit. Then I became a teacher because I had to teach my kid because they were doing virtual learning. So I had to completely move my schedule from 6 days a week daytime schedule to 4 days a week nighttime schedule to make sure that I was taking care of my family obligations. And so when you start looking at what time management looks like part-time versus full-time, when it comes to part-time content creation, you're at the mercy of your job or your school or whatever obligations you already have in place, right? You're going to have to pick and choose when you can create content, and you're pretty much at the mercy of your existing schedule. So if you work a 9 to 5, right, you're limited to, I can only create content from when I get home to when I go to bed. Now you can choose when you go to bed and how much time you're going to dedicate to losing sleep, which I don't recommend, by the way, because that's a health concern. But you get to a point where you have to make a decision. Okay, I'm going to dedicate 3 hours a night. Now, if you have a wife and kids, that suddenly becomes probably 2 hours a night or 1 hour a night because you need to spend time with your kids. They get home from school. You get home from work. It's family time. We're going to eat. We're going to get the kids ready for bed. We're going to spend some time with them. 8 or 9 o'clock hits. Now it's content creation time. Or it's spend time with the wife, and 10 o'clock hits and now it's content creation time. So we're going from 10 to 1 or whatever. when you're a part-time creator, you're at the mercy of your existing schedule. And so time management is important because you need to make sure that you're maintaining the relationships. And I'm going to talk about this in another dad log, but maintaining your relationships with your family. You need to make sure that your physical and mental health is still being maintained, because there's a lot of sacrifices that come along with that. A lot of people will sacrifice their mental and physical health for the sake of chasing their content creation dream. I did it. I went through it. I've been there, done that. That leads to burnout eventually. So you have to be careful about how you're managing your time as a part-time creator. Now, the other side of time management, when you're a full-time creator, time management becomes even more important, right? Because you're going to be spending the majority of your time is going to be spent streaming, right? Or at least that's how it used to be. Or if you're a full-time YouTube creator, you're going to be spending a lot of your time editing, recording B-roll, making sure that you've got all the footage you want, and then editing it together. And editing takes a very long time, right? So your time management has to be on point, because you still need to fit in eating meals, working out, getting plenty of sleep, maintaining your relationships. There's all of these other things that you still have to dedicate time to that it can be very easy to sacrifice. And it can be easy to say, well, I got to give this up because I need to get this done by this date, and I have to do that, right? Or you're a slave to the schedule, right? Where you're dedicating X amount of hours. I will be live from 8 to 4 p.m., right? 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. I'm going to be live 6 days a week. So all of a sudden you've got your 48 hours of content that you're creating. Then you have to take time to engage on Twitter, to create social content for Instagram or TikTok, to get your next YouTube video out, to respond to the emails or the DMs that you get, to work with your sponsors, to work with your partners, to work with other creators, right? You could see very quickly how this starts to pile up. And if your time management isn't on point, where you say, all right, I drop the kids off at 8. I'm back by 8:30. Take the dog for a walk by 9. Work out from 9 to 9:30. Now from 9:30 till noon, when I eat lunch, right, I'm going to do social content creation. After lunch from 12:30 to 2, I'm going to dedicate to YouTube content. And then from 4 to 10 p.m., I'm going to dedicate to streaming for my night schedule, right? That's an example of how I would lay out my day. Now, when the kid goes back to school and I can actually dedicate my time to that schedule, we'll see how that impacts growth. We'll see how that works out. I also am taking into consideration the fact that, I mean, we've been dealing with this pandemic and everything that's going on, and trying to teach the child, which that takes up a lot of time. So time management is always an adjustment, right? You're always taking time to make sure that you're trying to figure out what schedule can work so that you don't burn out. And again, I'm going to talk about burnout when I talk about mental health, creator well-being, which is going to be the next episode of the podcast, because I've gone through the phases. I've gone through these phases where I have been burning the candle at both ends, right? We're burning the midnight oil. We're up early. We're doing all of the things that we can possibly do to help this dream succeed. And then you get to a point where you're just drained. Your creative juices are gone. You're no longer innovating. You're at a point where you're just like, I can't keep doing this because I'm literally going mental, right? So you have to make sure that when you're dedicating time to content creation, that you're setting limits for yourself and that your time management is dedicated to that time, because it can get very easy to get sucked into the doom scroll that is Twitter or Facebook or whatever, right? And you can spend a lot of time on social media not creating content, but consuming content instead, or getting in arguments over stupid stuff or whatever it is you do on Twitter. And then all of a sudden you lost all that time to actually creating content or managing the things that you need to manage to continue to grow your channel, your community, etc. So that's what I've got on time management, guys. Make sure that you're setting specific intervals as best you can that are dedicated to content creation. And again, I'm terrible at it, but when you're in the moment, especially if you've got a family, when you're in the moment, be in the moment as best you possibly can. The last thing that I want to cover with you as part of episode 2 of the Dad Logs Revisited is setting goals for yourself. A lot of folks set really, really bad, unachievable goals for themselves, and then they get super disappointed when they don't hit them. I want to give you guys some examples of good goals, and I want to give you some examples of bad goals. Everything that, when you're setting goals for yourself, everything should be able to be measurable. And for the most part, it should be in your control, right? And this is the primary difference. When I made the realization that I was setting unrealistic goals for myself, was when I realized that I was setting goals that I had no control over, right? It is great to have in your head a sub goal or a follower goal or whatever the case might be. But the problem with a sub goal and a follower goal and a tip goal and any other kind of goal that you would set that would be a measure of success in the content creation world is generally a bad goal, because you do not control who subs to you. You do not control who follows you. You do not control who watches you. You do not control someone else's finances or time. And when you realize that you don't have control over those things, it can be very disheartening, because you're like, well, if I don't have a follower goal or I don't have a sub goal or I don't have whatever, what am I doing then? Right? And this is the hard part about content creation, because everyone's focused on number of followers, number CCV, time spent watching, all of those things, right? Those are the metrics by which a creator is measured by the industry. And the problem with that is that none of those things you have control over. So if you don't have control over those things and those aren't your goals, what are your goals? Here are some realistic goals that you can set to achieve success, depending on what you define success as. So for instance, if you set a goal that I will stay consistent in my schedule for 4 weeks, you set a schedule, you maintain that schedule for 4 weeks, you've succeeded. That's a realistic, achievable goal that you have control over. I'm going to create 2 TikToks a week for 4 weeks. Set a time frame, set a number, and dedicate your time to achieving that goal. That's an achievable goal, right? You don't have control over the number of likes, the number of people who comment. Now, you can encourage those things, right? Which is where it gets tricky, because people start thinking, oh, I should set a follower goal because I can say, follow the channel, follow the channel, follow the channel, follow the channel. You should sub to the channel. You should do this. We see this in YouTube videos nonstop, right? I do it because it's a reminder and an encouragement to say, if you enjoy the content, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, right? But I don't have direct control over whether or not you actually like and subscribe to the channel, right? And that's the problem with having a follower goal or a sub goal or whatever other type of goal that you have that you don't have control over. So when you're setting goals, ensure that they are goals that you have control over and that you can achieve. Now, there's something to be said for setting the goals too low, right? I'm going to create, I'll just, like, for instance, this isn't my situation because I've got a family, I've got a wife, I've got all the other stuff that I do on a daily basis that I have to do as part of my responsibility to the other humans in my life, right? But if you're, for instance, a single person who is working a scheduled 9-to-5 job, you've got from 5 p.m. until you go to bed 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, right? You've got 7 hours or 8 hours where you can dedicate time to content creation. Your goals for the number of pieces of content or the type of content or whatever the case might be is going to be significantly higher than potentially my goals can be. I am dedicating myself to delivering the Dad Logs Revisited once a week for 8 weeks. That is something I have control over, and that is something I can control, do, and achieve. Now, that's an aggressive goal because I also want to be creating social content. I want to get my workouts in. I want to make sure that I am consistent in my schedule with the actual live stream. I want to dedicate time to innovate for the live stream. I've got a whole list of things. That I want to get done for stream improvements. I've got a bunch of dad jokes that I need to record, another 40 dad jokes that I want to record and edit and put in place, right? There's a lot of other things that I want to achieve as part of my overall time management and goal setting, right? But a realistic goal for me is to deliver the Dad Logs Revisited on Fridays for 8 weeks. And I have put together an outline for what I want to cover as part of each dad log. I've got each episode outlined. So I've got the episode title. I've got a list of what I want to talk about in the episode. And that's what I'm going to be focused on, editing and making sure that I deliver for you guys every single Friday for the next 7 weeks. We did last week's dad log. If you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you go check out Dad Log Revisited episode number 1, which is going to be somewhere up in this area shortly. So make sure that you go check that out after you finish this video. But the point is that you should be setting goals that are achievable and that are in your control. So set realistic goals and then go out and see your success through. Ladies and gentlemen of the Legion, thank you so much for hanging out with me for Dad Log episode number 2 of the Dad Logs Revisited, where we talked about creating consistent content. I appreciate you guys for stopping on in. If you enjoyed the content, make sure that you like, subscribe, ding the notification bell for when I upload next. And I appreciate each and every single one of you for taking the time. If there's something that you want covered as part of the Dad Logs Revisited, make sure to leave a comment below. We'll see you next time. And with that, I leave you with be life, be love. And as always, God bless and good games. We'll see you guys next time.